Welcome to the Room at the Table podcast. I'm your host, Kimberly Milo. Hi, friends. Welcome to Room at the Table podcast with Kimberly Milo. Thank you for watching. Thank you for following along and joining in every Monday. If you're enjoying the podcast and it's encouraging to you and you feel like it's inspiring and you're getting some good information from it and inspiration, please consider forwarding it on and sharing it with a friend. The goal of the podcast is to just reach anybody who's considering having a relationship with Christ and really what that looks like to walk it out. It's not as easy as it might seem, on regular social media. And so that's what this podcast is about, is kind of the nitty gritty, the highs and the lows and everything in between of knowing who Christ is and then where that has led people in their lives. So as you know, all my guests, some are authors, some are doing a philanthropy, some have different work lines that they do. And so this is just about how does Christ move each of us and what's the relationship we each have. So thanks for sharing the podcast. Today, I'm looking forward to talking with a new friend of mine. We have a mutual friend in common. Her name is Kayla Nordlum, and she is an author of her first book. Today, we're going to be talking about relationships and romantic love. So Kayla, thank you so much for being here.
Yes, of course. Thanks for having me.
It's really fun to have this topic on. It's a first for me since the podcast is still relatively new. And your book was so interesting. It's kind of a tell-all of your history in relationships and dating up to this point in your life, especially as a Christian, and what that looks like, the good, bad, and the ugly, all of it. So I really found it, gosh, just so helpful and so important. You had so many good insights in it. So that's what we're going to cover today. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, I know you live in Arizona and you work in the law world. So give us a little background.
Yeah, I live in Arizona, and it's actually the first rainy day, I think, of the year. So
Wow. Okay.
I'm loving it. It's bringing me back to my hometown of Portland, Oregon. But yeah, I live in Arizona. My whole family's here. 2 siblings that have kids. So it's nice to be around family here. And I also work fully remote for a law firm, a Seattle law firm, actually, fully remote as a paralegal. And I work in family law. So really interesting field because I'm dealing with divorce and I'm dealing with custody cases, and sometimes there's criminal cases. So as a paralegal, I'm basically getting the cases ready for the attorney to present in court. So that's my 9 to 5. And then I also am in ministry as well. But
Oh, you are. Okay. Very cool. And so you're involved obviously in a church there. What do you do in the ministry? I'm just curious. People do different things, so it's fun to find out.
yeah, I'm at Pillar Church. It's in Scottsdale, Arizona. We just recently changed our name, but we have this amazing, incredible young adult ministry called Seven. It's based out of Acts 6, when the leaders at that time in Acts 6 appointed 7 leaders, and the church grew in Acts. And so we named the ministry was named that. And so I help run our young adults with my brother, who's the pastor.
Oh, wow.
And at Pillar, I also do a lot with our Connect team at our Next Steps booth, prayer team, just whatever I can get my hands in, wherever they need help. But yeah, it's about, I think I was thinking the other day, been about 10 years of what I would call full-time ministry, because even when you have a full-time job, when you're serving in the church and you have this desire to just build, it turns into full-time somehow. So I say I'm in full-time ministry and full-time corporate. So
you're busy and you're an author now. So congrats on the book.
Thank you.
So exciting. How was the journey of writing the book?
Well, it was kind of crazy because I felt like about 7 years ago, I got the title. And the book isn't very big, so it took me 7 years.
Right here. Yes, I want to talk about things. The one that got away, the one that got away. I love the title.
Yes, so I think for me, it was literally a God thing. The title popped in my head in line for a ride at Six Flags back in like 2015, 2016. And I was going through a really bad breakup, and my brother said, come out to California, get your mind off of it. And we were standing in this line for a ride, and he said, I feel like you're going to write a book about your story. And I was like 26 at the time. And I was like, really? And I was like, I do like to write. And then it was like almost in that moment, I heard the one that got away, but not with the G-O-D, the one that got away. And I felt like the Lord said, you thought I got away. And this whole idea of like the one that got away, when we talk about it in culture, is like the best thing we ever had. Yes. And somehow we let it slip away. Well, I felt like for me in my relationship with God, it was like I was born and he loved because we first loved he loves us and we love him, but here's our first love. And
Mhm.
so as time goes on, we trade his love for other loves of the world. And
Mm.
I just felt like I was supposed to tell the story of like he was always the best one. And
Mm.
he was the one that got away, even though he isn't, he's omnipresent, he's always around. Like I let his, the love grow cold. And so the
Mm.
title popped in my head. And then obviously I went on a journey of, okay, what does this look like to write a book like this? And knowing it was going to probably be a diary type book because I had journaled every day since I was 12.
Wow.
So yeah, I was like an avid journaler, even from being a young girl. And so, I mean, almost daily. And so I
Wow.
pulled out like a huge Tupperware container of journals and I said, okay, I'm going to start reading. And I mean, I started with fifth grade Kayla and I was just like, what was on my mind at that time? And boys was very early on a part of the story. And so reading the journals, from fifth grade Kayla all the way through high school and early college and more serious adult relationships, I'm like, there's a theme here. It's
Mm.
this, am I enough? And I'm like, how many people can, relate to that? So, but
Right.
yeah, the idea of the book really just came, I was as a God thing. And now it's been really beautiful that the Lord had told me, I need you to do this for me. This is the one thing I want you to focus on. And I kept like, well, I want to do this for your ministry and I want to do this. And he was just like, finish the book. I almost could hear that finish the book over and over, but it was such an intimate, hard thing to
Mm.
do because it was my life story. And it was like,
Right.
even just going through the trauma of rereading the pain and like trying to write it in a way that was authentic, but also classy. Because some of
Mhm.
the things I've gone through are like, they could be 50 shades of gray. It's
Right.
like, how do
Right.
you write this in the mindset of like I want a young Christian reader to read this and get healing, but also being raw with the details of the
Honest.
story. Yeah.
Right.
So
And I think as Christians, that's one of the things that gets a little confusing is that Christians often think I have to come across and look a certain way because a lot of people who aren't Christian are ready and waiting to judge and
yeah.
say you're hypocritical. So it gets confusing if you're trying to follow the Lord, but you also just want to be a human and be honest and real. And
Yes.
it's not like we ever forget our flesh. Like we're all trying to survive in our bodies and live and have relationships and work. But yet I feel like the world wants to pounce, if we
Yeah.
look a certain way or mess up. And of course, we want to follow as good as we can and as well as we can. But we know that there's grace. So we're free. We're
Yep.
free to not be legalistic. And yet
Hmm.
we want to be good stewards and good ambassadors
Yeah.
and like come across certain ways. So it's a tricky dynamic, but I'm of the mindset of being rather be honest and be open. And so that's why I really loved your book because
Yeah. Thank
it
you.
was really raw and honest. And I felt like I was kind of in your journal. And as I was reading it, I thought, I wonder if when she's writing this, if it was tricky for her to write some of this, even for your family to read.
Yep.
But I just really respect that you're like, you know what, this is the truth. And it doesn't have
Yeah.
to look a certain way just because you follow Christ. Like this is the honest truth. You're working it out. So
Yep.
I really commend like the style that the book is written in. And I really encourage anybody who's single, really anybody, especially women to read it. And like, even me being married, like, I'm like, yep, I went through a lot of the things. In fact, I thought, gosh, you have so much knowledge in there. Like people need to, like, I have a daughter who's 21 and another one who's 16. Like they kind of need to know, like, this is what it really feels like, looks like. And they're working these relationships out now as teens and young 20s. So there's so much to offer in this book, everybody. And let's just, before we
Thank you.
forget, it's on Amazon, right?
Yes. Yes. It's on Amazon and you can get actually the Kindle version as well. So you can get paperback or Kindle. So
Okay.
yeah.
Got it. And so before we dive into like the content and really break it apart, tell me like how you met Christ. I mean, you refer to it a little bit in the book, but like were you raised from a young age as a believer and then kind of came in and out of following? That's a lot of people's experience, at least in the high school developmental years. They kind of put it aside or they're not really sure. They don't know them. They're not as hungry kind of a thing. So what's your story there?
Yeah, I was saved when I was 8. My parents found the Lord when I was 8. So I was in Sunday school when I was 8. And I remember having that moment like, okay, yes, I accept Jesus. And I think I got baptized around 15. But
Oh,
I would
okay.
say we were in like a larger church when I was young. And then I think when I turned 13, 14, we went to, my parents helped at a church plant. And there
Oh,
was probably like 20, 30 people there and like 3 kids. And that was kind of where my like religious legalistic side started to kind of where I just didn't like it anymore. It was
mm,
small and it was really just there was some mean old people in there and it was just not and I was kind of going through my high school years where I was wanting to be popular and like church
yeah,
wasn't cool.
yeah.
And so even though and this is why I tell parents all the time too, like even if your high school kids are away, like keep praying because I'm literally a product of a praying mother who is like,
Yes,
even though
yes,
my daughter looks like her life is nowhere near the last 5 years of my life really being in full-time ministry, I know that is because of the prayer she's prayed. And it's the
yes.
seeds that are planted at a young age. So I had seeds planted at a young age, but I basically from 16, 17 to by the time I turned to like 24, 25, I was just doing whatever. And then from 24 to about 30, it was like lukewarm. So that's kind of how
Mhm,
I break it up. It's like I met
yeah,
the Lord when I was 8. And then around the time my high school started, I was like, I don't want anything to do with Christianity. And then
mhm,
around 24, 25, I read this book called Own It. And if you grew up in the church and there is this like weird religious stuff that your parents handed down, this book called Own It, it's by the DeMarcos, I think it's a couple. It changed my life. It changed the way I
oh,
viewed religion. It changed the way I viewed God. And it's very simply written, but it's basically talking about owning the faith for yourself, whatever that looks like. And so
mhm,
it went from being my parents' faith when I was 24, 25
yes,
to being mine. And I got really excited about it. However, I was balancing being, in the world. So it's like, it was a very lukewarm. So
yeah,
then when I turned 30, which is chapter 7 in the book I really talk about me at the well, really meeting Jesus for the first time, everything shifted. So
mhm,
it's and like you mentioned, it's becoming a Christian and getting saved. It's everyone has a different journey in that. Some
yeah,
people get
right,
saved and they have this immediate sanctification
yeah,
and they never touched anything from their past. And some people have like a slower walking it out
right.
journey. So
Yeah, it's unique to everybody, and that's why I always ask my guests. Like, sometimes I wonder, like, I wonder if the audience is just they want me to dive into the core content of the podcast, but I find it interesting to hear how people came to know Christ simply because I wasn't raised from being a baby on as a Christian. So I'm always curious how many people met him really young and then started to own it themselves and at what time? Or did they ever know him and they met him later in life? And it's all over the place. And that looks different for everybody. Like God's so personal in the way he stays on us. But I love what you said about the prayer. You're kind of the product of a praying mother because I've had that same question with myself, like, why was faith something that I was always hungry for? I think it's my temperament, but I had a next door neighbor and another neighbor down the street who were really active in Christianity. And I always wonder, like, were they praying for me or my family to know the Lord better? And so I always attribute at least some of my curiosity and then my saving to them.
yeah,
And I think the prayers that people are praying sometimes you never know how those prayers could have influenced somebody
yes,
because you lose touch with people so much in our lives. But I just love that you brought that up, that
yeah,
your mom never stopped praying for you. And so I
yeah,
encourage any mother or parent listening to this, like, keep praying over your children, just even in your mind, for them to get to know the Lord because it will really help them in their life, whatever they go through. So great point on bringing that up.
yeah.
Okay. So after 30, you said 30, 24 to 30 was like lukewarm, and then you dove in
Yep,
deeper.
full on, literally from 30 to 35, now I'm 35. It's been just, mountain to mountain. And obviously you have little dips, but not like the falling away as previous.
Got
So
it.
I had to ask myself, okay, what really changed? Like what and I think I had like okay, God, this was the meeting at the well moment. Like I'm
Yes.
broken, you know everything I've done. I
Mm,
need to know who you are for real. And
mm,
so I think doing the actual work alongside the spirit allowing to reveal some things through therapy. I think it really did just like it was like an aha moment.
yeah.
And that's been a really cool last 5 years. And I look back at the last 5 years versus the 5, 6 years when I was in my lukewarm season. And I'm like, man, the feelings I feel when I go to sleep at night, like I'm not on any medications. I genuinely life is hard, but it doesn't feel like it to me. Like I'm very
Mhm.
stable and I'm hard to rock. And so I'm like, it's really interesting because I was so emotionally driven. Even, and this is all saying even during knowing Jesus. Like, even
Yes.
in the so it's like, it's not just like you meet Jesus and everything's okay. I
Yeah.
met Jesus, really met Jesus at 24, and I had still really struggled. So it's both. It's there is this part that is your part to play in it, and
Right.
letting go of some things, and looking
Yeah.
at yourself and looking at your habits, and
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
while praying and allowing the spirit to also heal you as well. So, yeah, I could write
It's
a book on that as well.
for sure. It's such a collaboration, that's what I don't know if a lot of people understand who are looking in or on the outs looking in at Christians is like, and there's different degrees depending on people's personalities and where they are in their faith, beginning to mature kind of thing. But it's a collaboration of allowing the Lord to work on you, right? And
Yes,
praying for that and saying, confront me, humble me, teach me, like, what do you want? It's not like he just does it and zaps you. I mean, in some
I know,
cases,
I
maybe that
wish.
happens. It's rare, but yeah, we have to do the work of
Yeah,
looking at him and wondering and reading and being kind of curious. So I really relate to your relationship with him and wanting more and being lukewarm or not so sure or thinking you are Christian, but then you're not really living that way. And
yeah.
so it's a journey. It's a process for all of us. So at what age did you start actually writing the book?
Probably, let's see, I think it was around 2017, so 27. Yeah, about 27.
7. And
And then I
so
finished it this year, so 35, yeah.
wow, so you really took your time and made
Yeah.
sure to edit, what you needed
Yes,
to.
and I think too part of it was that it was so heavy, so how I kind of did it was I kept, like, one man, like, so for people that don't know, each chapter is a different, relationship I had and what I learned in that relationship, and I had to kind of break it down by, okay, I'm gonna read the diary from that relationship. I'm gonna
Mm,
highlight things in my diary for that relationship. I'm gonna, like, walk through this with the Lord and say, "Okay, God, where was my parts?" Because I didn't
mm,
want this book to be a burn book to the men that I didn't want this to be like a,
yeah,
"You all did me wrong, and
and
here's
it's
the
not.
story."
It's
So
not.
I was like, "Okay, God." So it took multiple writings to say, "Okay, here's what I out of emotion really wanna say, but then
Yes.
let's scale it back." Then I also had to do the whole, okay, I'm going to be as raw as possible. Now let's try to scale that back as well. Like I say in the
Yeah.
chapter that I lose my virginity in the first chapter, I say I went to bed a girl and woke up a woman. And I think
Yes.
everyone can infer what I mean by that. It's not like
Yes.
I have to
Yes.
go into the details of that, but I think that took me partnering with the Holy Spirit to say, okay, God, you know what I'm trying to say. How do I
Yes.
say this in a way that's classy? So that alone took a long time to do for each chapter.
That makes a lot of sense. Again, because you're trying to, like you said, be classy with
Hmm.
how you're talking about your real and raw
Yes.
and honest situation and emotions, and probably thinking about, who's reading this. It's not just
Yeah.
a stranger, it's
Yeah.
fam and it's the men that you were in a relationship with too.
Yep.
So you have to be there's so many angles to it.
That is the other thing I really wrestled with, is reaching out to the guys that it was about. Obviously, the names are changed in the book, but I mean, I'm a block and a move on. So when I leave a relationship, I'm not like a we're friends and we talk. So pretty much all of the men in this book, like, it was a block and a move on. And so I really wrestled with, like, do I reach out? Do I say, hey, just to let you know? Obviously, the names were different, but I really felt like I wrote it in such a way that was honoring. If
Mhm.
even if they did read it and was like, well, this is our story, I really wanted to write it in a way that I don't need to go back and open old doors. And a lot of them are married now, so that's not
Yeah,
even fair to the women in their
totally.
lives. But
Yeah.
I did really want to write it in a way that was honoring to the people of my past, just as much as I would want to be honored if they wrote a book about me. So
Yeah, you did a great job with that because, I mean, there were times where you could tell you were like, "Really?" And you're like, you're frustrated and you're angry, and even as a reader, I'm like, "Okay, that's loser situation."
yes, yes,
Like, "Okay, I would not have been okay with that." But you don't say anything, like, unkind, really, like, you just
it's
kinda say this
my
is
yes, it's my the way I was feeling in my
yes.
interpretation of the actions that were, it was more so my interpretation of what was going on.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
then there is a chapter that is actually talks a lot about the man I used. So it wasn't all just like these
Yes,
are the there was a
yes,
chapter.
that was so, like, honest and just like, wow, okay, yeah, like, I guess women do the same thing at times, and you were
Yes,
so aware of, "I'm kind of using this guy," and I'm like, my heart was breaking for him, but I'm like, "But this happens," like, anyway, there's so many good things about it. I really encourage, especially people who are dating, to read this because you've learned so much, and one of the things you said just a second ago about when you were younger and you had woke up a woman, and you make a reference in the book that I thought was just really profound, and I have a few things I wanna highlight and
Yeah.
talk about. You wrote, "When you are joined to someone," meaning in the actual act, of being with somebody, "when you are joined to someone, the unjoining process is messy, and as you are dating and evaluating a relationship, you may realize that relationship is not leading to marriage. If that's the case, it's even messier to exit that relationship because a soul tie or quote marriage was created. Sex is not just physical, it's spiritual." And I loved how
Yeah.
you brought in the soul, that your souls were actually married spiritually in the act of actually being together physically. But I don't think that young women, especially, and obviously men who are, when they're younger, even more driven by hormones.
Yeah.
Uh, this is a really hard thing to understand, like the effects of that long term. I don't
Yes.
know if we're able to get that when you're teens and
15,
in your early
16. Yeah.
20s, but it made so much sense. I was like, "Oh, that's exactly why it's even harder for women because we're more relational." And
Yep.
so there's been a soul marriage there through the
Yeah.
act. So I
Yeah.
love the way you put that.
Yeah. And a lot of people, don't really think about this, but there was no dating in the Bible. So people were a lot of the times those people were arranged. It was arranged, and then the man would
Right.
go off to prepare the home. So there wouldn't even be this like temptation period.
Yeah.
And then they would come together and consecrate the marriage, and then it that would be the joining moment. Where like today in our culture we have this thing called dating, and so that's why it's as a Christian it's really important that you keep really good boundaries in dating because when you do consecrate your
Yep.
relationship, you
Yep.
are marrying that person. That
Right.
there is no differentiating line in the Bible of like, okay, well now
Right.
you're married because you signed a contract with the state. It's like
Mhm.
the joining together of two. That's the
So good.
marriage. So, yeah.
So wise. And maybe there are a lot of books on this, and I just because I became a Christian later, more deep in my faith later in life, I'm just not as experienced with that literature, but it's just such a great analogy, but a truth of how
Yeah.
biblically God kind of made it for us. Like there shouldn't be this big long dating period where you're marrying soul
Hmm.
wise, intimacy wise, a lot of people,
Yes.
before the one. So I just thought that was a really great way of
Yeah.
saying when you move on to, and what chapter is this? This is, I don't know if I can find it quick enough, but there's a chapter, 2, and you have a whole section in here on what toxic relationships are. And it was so helpful. And it was just like this one stop shop. And I was like, oh my gosh, like every young woman needs this whole bullet point to like pay attention. You say here on page 26, a healthy relationship is oneness of goals, values, and beliefs. When a relationship has no oneness, meaning both people are going in opposite directions, both mentally and spiritually, there's no order. And God is a God of order, not confusion, as it says in 1 Corinthians 14 through 16. And then you start talking about, are you tired? Are you feeling worn out? Are you feeling drained? Are you crying all the time? Are you anxious in this relationship? Like, that is so common. Like women aren't paying attention to, and maybe even some men aren't paying attention to, it's exhausting. And I always have to try to keep up and I'm crying half the time, or I'm anxious, or is he doing this? Or what did he mean by that? Or I'm tolerating that was irritating, but I guess I'll just deal with it. Like there were so many good points in there just in those couple of sentences about the exhaustion and confusion. Then you start talking about, are they violating your heart? Are they taking advantage of needs? And then you have another list of 5 things. So, I mean, I just was like, wow, like this is so, so helpful. And I think that came from a sermon that you had heard.
Yes, yes, it did, and it was a monumental moment for me where I was like, "That's it. That's exactly it." And I think for so long in my relationships, I would look at those toxic traits and say, "Okay, this is either one." I would say, "Oh, this isn't toxic," or I'd say they're toxic. But the
Mhm.
real thing is when you look at yourself and you put yourself up against that list. Because
Mm.
sometimes we think like, "Oh, the relationship's toxic because they're toxic." But
Yeah.
in some seasons of our lives, we're the toxic one. And so I think like when I was in this relationship specifically with this guy, he obviously we were 17, so we were just kind of, getting started with our lives, but we were both toxic. But when I
Yeah.
heard that sermon, I was like, man, that I could not think of a better way to quickly checkmark, list, define what
Yes.
is relational toxicity. What does it look
Yes.
like? And
Yeah, that
I tell girls all the time, if your nervous system is all jacked up every time you're with that person,
yeah.
that's the only test you need right there.
That
Your
is
nervous
so
system should be calm. However, fighting and arguing is a normal part of relationships, but your nervous system shouldn't be jacked up where you're anxious, where you have to go to the bathroom, where you
yeah,
can't eat. That's your ultimate check mark right there.
yeah. So, so good. And also the confusion. Like if there's a lot of confusion in your relationship, that you really need to pay attention to that because maybe you're not communicating well and you both are willing to work on that and figure out, oh, he communicates this way, I communicate
Yes.
that. But beyond that, if there's a lot of like, what's going on here? I don't get it. Like that's not your person. And you
Yes.
have some stuff to look at, whether it's in yourself or if the other person's willing to look at himself. So I
Yep.
really loved your list there. Are they violators of your heart? You can't eat, can't sleep. You drive to work crying. Is he protecting you? Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Like these are things you want to be looking at. Does he care about your heart, your protection? Um, you say here on page 27 at the top, with violators, it's not always outright abuse, but sometimes it's subtle. For example, they tell you what you want to hear instead of the truth, and they withhold information or even their heart and use the silent treatment or even try to silence you. Like, I mean, right there,
Yep.
like completely toxic, unhealthy, subtle abuse or outright abuse, withholding information or, trying to get you to be quiet.
It it's very much this is so funny because I wrote this chapter probably in 2018, 2019, and it was kind of before gaslighting was a trend to say like, "Oh, they
Mhm.
gaslit me." And
Right.
basically that's what I was saying in that is that
Yeah.
maybe there's a little bit of gaslighting going on where you're like, it doesn't feel outright like it's abuse. However, I'm feeling crazy most of the time. Or I'm feeling
Totally.
like I'm the one that's a lot, And
Yeah.
I was trying to say that without knowing that was going to be a trend, but yes, it is. It's the subtle ways that abuse is showing up in the relationship that people reading this hopefully will could recognize that actually that is toxic,
And
through
I
that.
think women are prone to that. They're prone to say, "Oh, it's me," or "I just need to be more forgiving," or "I just need to be more grace giving," or "I just need to like not second guess and not doubt." Like we do that all the time. Like that
Yeah.
shouldn't even be an issue in a relationship, especially in the beginning. Like I'm not
Yes.
saying once you have a real closeness that you don't need to look at your stuff. You do. Or
Yeah.
maybe you do need to be more grace giving, but not when you're just starting where you're just
Yeah.
constantly having to throw grace on it and constantly having to forgive. And I don't know. I just, that really, it's so tricky. And you do make a point in here. You talk about the enemy and love and how he does tricks. You talk about the
Mhm.
tricks of him, and the enemy can trick us into believing that his plan for love is far more satisfying and fulfilling than God's. And I feel like sometimes that's the enemy playing tricks on you to say, well, see, you're not really forgiving. Like if
Mhm.
you were really a good Christian, you'd be forgiving the cheating, or you'd be forgiving that he,
Mhm.
hid this from you, or you'd be forgiving that he made a mistake, especially
Yep.
early on. But that just sets you up for so much doubt.
Mhm.
Did you have that experience too, where
Yeah.
beginning?
Yeah, and I always say the devil doesn't come with the pitchfork and the red and the horns like we see in cartoons. He comes dressed as everything you'd want, but just slightly off. And it's like once we can get grasp and understanding of how he is a trickster and how he comes, we can easily see into his schemes and in his ways. I mean, he really does come like the knight in shining armor. And then there you go. Behind all of that is, a narcissist or someone who's physically abusive or, whatever. But you're like, wait, he looked great on the outside. So that was a lot of the stories that I went through with people, not even just in the book, but even just dating and, 3, 4 dates, 5 dates. I'm like, there's something off here. And it's
Mhm.
recognizing, that's the way the enemy, he's not going to come. I'm not going to go out on a date with someone today that doesn't have a job, that is disrespectful to the waiter. Like, I'm going to think he's everything. And if I'm not discerning correctly, I can get myself in trouble. So, yeah, for sure.
I think you're talking also about paying attention. Like, a lot of times women want to feel good so badly when they're starting to date
Mhm.
somebody because it feels so good to be loved. Every human has that, the need to belong, the need to be desired. And then when you start to overlook things, you don't even pay attention to the fact that you're doing it.
Oh,
So
100%.
it sounds like you got really good at seeing what you weren't seeing
Mhm.
after these relationships and seeing a pattern, and then you realize,
Yep.
"Okay, that's on me. I have been
Mhm.
overlooking, like, this human has the right to be however they wanna be. I
Yeah.
don't necessarily have to enjoy that or be with it," you know?
Yeah. Yep. And I think too, you're not judging someone. In a sense, you are judging the person you're gonna potentially marry. Like, that's the most important decision outside of Jesus. So, I'm sorry if I'm judging you, but, like, I am gonna judge you because
Right.
this is a big decision. So, yeah, I obviously don't take that lightly, and I think one of the big things we're kinda missing in this conversation too is that you have to be filled up by Jesus first, because any dating relationship where you're going into the relationship saying, I need something from them, is going to
Mhm.
just start toxic. And so that was my history. Is again this idea of like I have this hole, which is a legitimate hole. Everyone has it. I'm going to fill it up with male attention, or a male love, or even like in good intention of like a husband someday. And the Lord the whole time was just saying, there's a hole only I can fill. Let
Yes.
me fill it. And then as you go into these dates now fully filled, the way that you date changes. Like, I didn't wake up one morning and I was like, I think I figured out how to like to know if this is a husband or not. It was like, I'm good. I'm filled up. And like, if you're not bringing your weight to the table, then like I just don't need it. And so
Hmm.
that really shifted the discernment, was that I actually am fully filled. I'm not looking for someone. I'm okay. And now
Yes.
I'm just evaluating. And I will say, like, people probably are thinking, well, you're just really picky, or like you're too. And I'm like, no, I actually am very open. I say to people all the time, like, if you ask me on a date and you love the Lord, I'm going on it. I think we need to be, as women, I think we need to be, if we're single and we want a godly guy, I think we need to give everyone who we know is godly, who has a godly reputation, a chance. So I'm
Mm,
very actually open to going on a date with somebody who, but you can tell pretty quickly, Christian or not, if there's fruit in their life. And so, but
right.
only you get that discernment by having a personal relationship with the one who created you, in
Mhm.
order, and then who created them as well. So that's where I've like really shifted in dating. I'm like, okay, I can see that you're just not on the same page as me, and I don't need that in my life. So yeah.
Right, and you've matured through that, you've learned through that, and
Yeah.
I understand that feeling, and that can still creep in any sort of romantic relationship, whether you're dating long term, short term, or even married. Because I even know in my marriage, if I start to try to want my husband to fill the God
Mhm.
sized hole, then I start getting much more let down, much more disappointed or irritable or whatever it is, and then I have to go, oh, that's right. I'm making my husband my God.
Yep.
Like, my God is the only one that can help me, feel content with who I
Yep.
am and who he is and what he is calling on my life. My husband is never meant for that role. And who we date is never meant for that role. It should really be like two
Yes.
people coming together who are already filled up,
Yep.
and then you complement each other and you can grow each other. But it's really easy to let that happen with romantic relationships. And maybe some
Yeah.
men go through the same thing where they expect their wife to fill every need for them emotionally, spiritually, physically. And it's just, we're not meant to have that by another human. Like, it's meant to be, like you said, a God
Yes.
shaped whole. So I really loved that. And towards the end of your book, you can see you're like, you're getting, like, you got there.
Yes.
So
Yes.
kind of fun to watch your growth. Another thing you
Yes.
talk about in the book is the the word devoted and what that means for commitment. And I thought that was really a great way to explain that commitment really includes the word devotion. Like, does
Yeah.
the person you're with really want your best? Are they looking at you and thinking of you and putting you kind of first? So, talk a little bit more about the commitment issue, because that was a really common theme for a lot of these
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah, I think probably a big part of it is a lot of these guys weren't really believers, and so that
Mm,
obviously shifts things. But now, looking through the lens that I have, I think before they can be devoted to you, they have to be devoted to him. And I think
mm,
you have to look at their devotional life. And I see that now, where I'm like, if they can't commit to their faith, they're definitely not going to be able to commit to me, who's a fallen person.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I I think dating now, that's like the first thing I go to. I'm like, okay, what does your devotional life look like? And at first off, if they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, okay, well then that's not it, you know? But
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, what is your like, and it's also action. It's like not just because people can say all day, like, oh, I read the Bible in the morning but it's like as you get to know them and you see that they're kind and it's the fruits of the spirit. Like, you know, are they showing those? Are those just coming out of them? Are they holding doors open? Or are they like, do they have good reputations? Do they have close relationships with their family? And I think all of that shows their devotion to the Lord. It's like
Yes.
he's so devoted or she's so devoted to the Lord that you can actually see it in her everyday life. Now
Mhm.
let's talk about devotion to a spouse. I think it flows through that. And so me in the season that I'm in, I'm a single. So I'm fully devoted to the Lord. My time is 100% to the Lord. However, like when I'm in a relationship in a marriage someday, I now know what healthy devotion looks like. And
Yes.
I'm, devoted to the Lord and I'm committed to the Lord. And, obviously it's not perfect and it's not going to be perfect in human relationships, but I think you have to see if that person genuinely is devoted, is committed to the Lord first, because then it'll just make it that much easier to be devoted to you and
Yeah,
committed to
so
you.
good. So good. And you talk about in the book, for people that are afraid of commitment, which, meaning they're not love loving, loyalty, or enthusiastic for you. Like, I
Hmm.
love that devotion. You say love, loyalty, or enthusiasm for a person, activity, or cause. So yes, if the person that you're with is not devoted to you, they're not enthusiastic about you, being loyal to you, and can be doing it consistently. You said there are two main fears we see in people who have a hard time committing. And you talk about the fear of feeling stuck that a lot of men can have, and probably women too. And then the fear of failure. And then you go in and you explain those. These are on pages 41 and 42. But then you talk about they lack spiritual discipline, and that this was probably one of the number one keys to look for. And you just brought that up, that you kind of want a man who obviously has his own sense of spiritual discipline. What is he hungry for with his own relationship and his own faith, so that the two of you can be a match? Otherwise, if you're knowing this before you're married, why would you pick somebody who, like you said, is not filling their God-sized hole up with God, but something else, cars,
Yeah.
work, all of that stuff. So I just really liked how you were talking about commitment. You talk about, so they lack spiritual discipline, lack energy, lack decisiveness. I mean, you get really granular with like these little, what we would say are these quirks in their personality, or they never can make a decision, or they're always so lethargic, or, things we don't pay attention to as like maybe potential real issues. And you kind of go into it. So that's what I love about your book, is you get like right into the heart of the symptoms, like what people are dealing with in relationship.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people recognize this, but maybe don't. For men, fear of failure is a big one. And I
Yes.
think
Yeah.
it is really connected to commitment, is that if you're in a long dating relationship, that I would say anything past 2-3 years is like long for dating. What is stopping him? And I think I could go for any age, but it's like a fear of this one not being the one. And it's like I'm
Mm,
just gonna kind of let it figure out itself. And so yeah, I recognize that in that particular relationship in the book, that there was a lack of energy
yeah.
and there was a lack of like really moving forward connected to that as well. And I'm like, they should be, and people again will say, well, that's not my personality. I just, I'm
Yeah.
laid back. I just sit back. And it's like,
Right.
yeah, but I saw you cheering on the Cowboys last week. So
That's
that's not
right.
your personality.
Right.
You get excited about things that you're excited about. So like,
Yeah.
why aren't you excited here? And that's also a hard look in the mirror to you of maybe it's time to move forward with,
Right.
onto a different person or onto singleness or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think it gets tricky. Like, where is the line? Like, where is the line where you're like, okay, like for me, I really was prayerful when I was considering dating my husband. Like, Lord, I knew there were things in him that I needed, like things that could
Mhm.
help me balance out my personality. And I kind of was like that for him. And so I was always prayerful about, is this a temperament issue, or is this a communication issue? Like, I was very careful and wanted God's guidance. And I wasn't like a huge Christian at that time, but I was a believer, and I always included the Lord in the dynamic with dating, but him especially. So where's that line where, because young women, especially in their 20s, they're trying to figure it out, and men too. I don't want to be generalizing to women, but I'm saying women
Yeah.
because you're a
But
female and you were writing kind of from that
yes, yes.
perspective. Where's the line between, in your opinion, some of this is gonna happen because you're 2 different humans, but then some of it is really unhealthy. Like you said, in this
Mhm.
particular relationship, he was kinda lackadaisical when it came to you, and yet he was a huge sports fan, so he has it in him. Where's that line? Do you feel like that's different for everybody's personality?
Yeah, I think personality we do need to like take that into consideration because there are people who are more introverted and who are a little more
Yeah.
like quiet and shy. So I do think personality, but again, even with personality, you have to ask yourself, are we compatible? Like
Yeah.
I'm very extroverted. I'm very extroverted, very loud, life of the party, funny. If he's not anywhere near that, that might be a deal breaker.
Oh,
However, I've learned because I'm like, I need a life of the party too, but I've also learned that might not be what I need. I might need someone who's that
right.
calm confidence. But
Right.
it's still, I just tie it back to like his relationship with the Lord because
Yeah.
personalities shift. People, this is like a kind of a hot thing, a hot take on this, but I really do believe that as you grow in your relationship with the Lord, you kind of become more extroverted. It's like we're called as to be a disciple and make disciples.
Right.
So we talk about introvert and extrovert, like yes, there are those personality types, but I believe the closer you get to the Lord, the more you look like him. And he
Mm,
was a people person. So it's like I
right. I see.
see it as like the line for me is like not so much personality, but like, does he love people? Does he look like
Mhm.
Jesus? Because you can be quiet, you can be shy, but you can have like this calm confidence that you love people well. Like I have
Yeah.
a couple friends who are more they're really good one-on-one at like events. Like they'll just be in the corner for hours one-on-one with someone. Where I'm mingling with everybody. I'm making sure everyone's
Right.
getting touched and get their
Right.
hands held. And so
Right.
that's personalities. However, they look different, but they're the same fruit is coming from it.
Yeah.
So I think the line is like, okay, personality wise, let's not like look too much into that. I mean, as far as compatible, we need to look at that. But is there fruit? Is there fruit coming from their
I
life?
agree. I
So
agree. The fruit is really important to pay attention. Is there goodness coming from their life? Is the way they treat other people, are they consistent with their word? Are they not
yeah, that's
sneaking?
a
And,
big one.
and just all the little things that you kind of are watching so closely when you're dating and you're thinking you really could like somebody long term. Your values, like, and how you live them out need to be similar, I think.
I say to girls dating today, I say, you're not just a single woman dating, you're a fruit inspector. That's what I've been calling myself. I'm like, I'm a fruit inspector. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but like I am gonna judge you. I'm looking for fruit. That's my job. I'm fruit inspecting, as I'm dating. And so it just really a lot does center around like I can see all I don't know his behind closed doors relationship with Jesus. Like I'm not gonna know that, but I am gonna see the fruit of that time. So
totally.
that's what we're looking for.
I wish we could get younger girls to have an interest in this more, because I think it would impact their 20s, when they are
Oh,
looking and they're trying on different relationships and they're exploring things. I don't feel like this is taught. I mean, and I guess unless you're raised in the faith, maybe, or as people in high school, if you're in a high school
and even
ministry.
then,
Yeah, like
it's not. And that's why I'm passionate about young adult ministry because I wish I would have had someone having these real conversations with me around 1920 specifically. Because high school, you do kind of you're really coming into like, okay, I'm a person. I have the but college, like you need some serious like guardrails and you need
totally.
otherwise really that does shift. And so yeah, for me, I'm like, the culture says your 20s are discovery years. And I'm like, we have to take whatever culture's saying and we have to flip it because
Totally.
Jesus came and flipped like it's an upside down kingdom with God. And so I look at what culture's doing and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do the complete opposite. And so when it comes to college age, I'm like, okay, the world is saying, go try it out. Go try out this guy, go try out this kind of see what you like before you get married. And I'm like, no, this is the season where you actually need to pull back and be really intentional about who you're connecting yourself to because it will have lifelong consequences.
True. It's so true. And I think that's how a lot of people end up in really unhealthy relationships young, or they can get pregnant and then they're stuck.
Yeah.
And it's so true. We need to be talking about this stuff at such a young age, but not with their parents, because they're not going to listen to their parents. They're going to
Yeah.
be listening to someone like you or somebody, maybe at church. But if they're not in a church, they need someone who's just coming to explain, what does the Bible say and why? Why does
Yep.
the Lord want
Why? That's
one person?
that's what I
Because,
say in chapter 1 because I was taught don't have sex. And
right,
that's not going to do anything. That's going to actually, in most cases, it's going to make people really curious. So
right,
it's
right, right.
like, I wish it would have been, hey, not don't, but like, here are the things that can happen if you do this.
That's right.
It's your life. You get to decide. However, I had this image. It literally was like maybe high school, college age, where this pastor took two pieces of paper and he glued them together with Elmer's glue. And then he tried to pull them apart. And it kind of like a little bit of that paper was on that paper and there was holes in it. And he said, this is what happens when you're with somebody and you break up.
So true.
You never look the same, and a little bit of use on him and a little, and it hit me. I was like, man, I've done that with people my whole life. And now, like, the blood of Jesus can heal and save and all of that. But it is like the pain I walked through. I don't want anyone else to go through that type of pain
Yeah.
because it's an experiment season. So,
Right. I know that's a really good way of putting it is, you can experiment, but without going to the point of, I
yeah,
guess, feeling traumatized from it. And in fact, speaking of trauma, you talk about that in the book. And I thought it was really interesting, the stuff you said about like your identity, self-hate, self-sabotage, and what you say about trauma, I thought was really powerful. Well,
yeah,
one, the enemy wants you to hate yourself because of your past decisions, but God wants you to love yourself because of his ultimate decision to create you, love you, and save you from the sin and shame of this world. You say once you've experienced trauma, whether it be abuse, betrayal, abandonment, loss, sickness, etc., the feelings to cope and survive become the main concern. And there's absolutely no shame in that natural human response, but the enemy wants nothing more than for your trauma, the thing you couldn't control, to become your chains, the thing you can control. Because he will
hmm
just use that to make you feel worthless and, not having any value anymore, and shame and guilt and all of that stuff. And Jesus is like doing the exact opposite, saying,
100%.
bring it to me. So talk a little bit about the trauma, because I just thought you were really profound in the identity part of how the enemy twists it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like, trauma, when trauma happens, the next thing that happens after that is how do we cope with it? So some
Yeah.
people cope with alcohol. I talk about that in the book: alcohol, drugs, sex, shopping, like all these different things. It's coping. But I think the bigger issue is the identity, because when you recognize that, okay, this happened to me. However, I am a child of God and God says this about me. So whether it's sexual abuse or physical abuse or even like, a child abandonment. Like for me, my mom like went through really bad postpartum with me. And so at a really young age, I didn't have that nurturing
Mm,
right away. And so I developed this abandonment issue.
mm,
And like, it's interesting how something that, again, I didn't do, that was done to me, and even in
yes.
like unintentional ways, created this trauma. And
Sure.
now
Yeah.
my whole life, I'm looking for ways to fill that, to cope. However, if at 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, my parents were speaking identity over me, then the abandonment issue would have kind of healed itself in knowing whose I was with the identity. And I think when I look at like worldly Gen Z age right now, that's just like hungry for answers about who they are,
Mhm.
I see them coping in really unhealthy ways. It's
Mm,
it's an identity issue at its core of saying, I can actually sit back in my life and be fully content because I know that there's a God who created me on purpose for a purpose. And all my job is right now is to discover what that is to walk alongside of him and discover why he created me. And that is the fulfillment I need. But if you
mhm.
don't have that, you're like, what? I mean, they say one of the most searched things on Google is, why am I here? Because people are actually saying,
Wow.
what's the point of this? Like, what's the point of all
Mhm.
of us being here? And without identity and without purpose, you're going to go try to fill these trauma wounds with other things. And so I think going through my life story and recognizing, okay, I should have pulled the scripture, but there is, I think I talk about it in the book, but there is this idea that we were created by God,
Yeah.
to give him glory and for his glory. And so everything goes through that filter now for my life. I'm like, okay, God, I wake up today and I'm like, God, I give you the glory. How do you want to use me for your glory today? Everything goes through that filter. Now I'm not looking like, gosh, like I don't feel accepted. Like I got to do better in my career. Like I gotta have a husband. Like everyone has a husband at 35. Like, why don't I have a husband? And it's
Mm,
this anxious, fast paced, like trying to fill a hole where I'm like, I know that he created me on purpose for a purpose. And it's
mhm.
a daily thing now until the day that I die to discover what that is. And that's the beautiful part. And it's a full time job. It's a beautiful thing we get to do.
Mm.
And you don't need anything else to fulfill you when you're actually walking in your calling. And that's what I just love now about my life, is that it's so much slower paced, which again is opposite of what the world says. In order for identity, your identity is in the things you do and in who you're with.
Yes.
And so you got to
Performance.
figure that out on your own. But identity in him says, I've got it all taken care of. And this is just a daily walk with me.
So, so powerful. And it's a daily walk, like you said. And I don't think a lot of people, even a lot of Christians, understand it's not just a once a week thing. It's
I
something
wish
where,
sometimes.
yeah, but it's not. We have to be really intentional. It's like any relationship. You don't get closer unless you are intentional about spending time with that person, getting to know him, them getting to know
Yep.
you, your dreams, what's God's instructions to you. Like it's such a process. And I wish more people were hungry for it because it really helps with everything you do because your identity starts to become it, filled in the right way. The
Yes.
only thing that can be lasting. You're not searching for all these different things to fill you up because that ends in 24 hours or in a week or in 3 years or eventually that's over. Whether it's, you're an athlete or you're on a big case, and then that case is eventually over. Like everything changes. So
Yep.
the only thing that can stay the same and keep you rooted there is your identity. So I just thought what you talked about in here was really good about your identity being in Christ and what trauma can do and how the enemy tries to turn it around. You also said something which I really stood out to me with trauma. And what I mean by trauma is like it could be what somebody thinks is a small trauma
Yes.
or a really huge trauma, but you say the enemy knows what he's doing when trauma hits. Usually, when it hits, an open door to numb the pain presents itself. That was really profound. I never thought about the fact that when you go through something where you're suffering, big or little, something's going to present itself intentionally from the opposing side, which is the enemy, to
Yep.
say, this will fix it
Yep.
rather
100%.
than go to him, go back to him because it feels redundant or it feels I don't get as much relief right away or I don't know where he is or who he is. Who should I pray to? The
Mhm.
numbing solution will present itself right away.
Yep.
Shopping, scrolling, gambling, drinking, eating, like whatever it is, even working out too much, like all the things that you
Yeah.
think even can help you when you make it your God, that's
Yep.
just a way of numbing what you really need to look at, which is slowing down. Who does he say I am?
Yep.
Even in the trauma. So you're so wise. Like, I mean, you really are. Do you feel like this has come from your faith and from your therapy and
Yeah.
journaling?
Yes. Yeah. I think looking back, I think we sometimes underestimate how powerful reflection is. And I think
Mhm.
just reading all those journals, I was like, man, and my heart just broke for like little Kayla, because I'm like, it
Mhm.
is, it was just a me trying to fill that hole and
Mhm.
to really understand who I was and kind of the assignment on my life. And so I think reflection played a really big part, but I also think the quiet time, like just my quiet time with the Lord, where I'm just getting little nuggets of just encouragement and affirmation from Him, and just identity, because He'll speak identity over you as well, you know. And I like am a performer by nature. I was a dancer growing up, and I love, and I'm words of affirmation. I love when someone says "good job." It's one of my
Mhm.
favorite things to hear, and so
Same.
I lived my whole life for the good job. And I remember when I like first started coming to the Lord, I was like, okay, now I have to kind of like, it's not about the good job anymore. And I just remember like one of my first quiet time moments, I felt like the Lord just said, good job. And it was
Mm.
just like, I still am going to get that from him in such a more pure way, because he can't lie. You know, it's kind of like, okay, God, you're saying this to me. I know you can't lie. So like, you are
Yeah.
proud of me, but again, like what the world is out there searching for, God wants to give so freely. And it says
Mm.
that all throughout scripture, like he who seeks wisdom, wisdom will be given. Like it's everything with the Lord is like, you have to do your part. Like you have
That's right.
to enter the quiet place. You have to seek him, but he's a God who loves to just lavish blessing and favor and wisdom. And so, yeah, it is, I think, a lot to do with reflection, but also a lot to do with the quiet place, which is what I tell
Yeah.
people all the time. Go to the
So
quiet place.
so profound and so needed. I think a lot of people blame God for things that go wrong, and yet they don't want to spend the time getting to know him. So they
Mm-hmm.
say things like, well, if there was really a God, why would all this terrible stuff be happening? And it's like, well, actually, if you would spend time with God, you would get to know his character. If you were studying him or reading about him or being curious about him or talking to people about him and going into his world, you would see this is the enemy is really in charge of here,
Yeah,
and we're to be light to it. It's not him, you know. Yes, he's allowing certain things, but it's because he's sovereign. So, there's just so much work to be done. I really appreciate how intentional you've become and that you're using this book to show
yeah,
young women especially, pay attention to your faith. Like, let that guide you. Let him guide you, not the excitement and the feelings and all the changing of dating different people and pursuing performance, work, dating as to your
mhm,
identity. And when you're talking about how gracious God is, you say in here, you talk about the gentleness of Jesus, even confronting us. You say, I get emotional. This is page 92. Every time I read this part of the story, because you had been giving some bullet points, and your scripture that you were referring to was he sees, John
mhm.
4:16 through 18. So I'll read the scripture and then
Yeah,
talk about what you wrote. The scripture says, quote, go and get your husband, quote, Jesus told her. The woman replied, I don't have a husband. Jesus says, you're right. You don't have a husband, for you have had 5 husbands, and you aren't even married to the man you're living with now. You certainly spoke the truth. And then you say, I get emotional every time I read this part of the story because Jesus sees all and knows all, even the messy parts. And your messy parts aren't too messy for him. When Jesus reveals something from our past to us, it doesn't come with shame or condemnation. It comes wrapped in love because he is love. He doesn't come to expose you, he comes to expose the darkness, your enemy. So, so true that he is a gentle God with us, and he's not hitting us over the head with a sledgehammer, and he's not about blame and shame. That's the opposite, right? And so I thought that was a beautiful way to just talk about one of the qualities of God that you were kind of at this point in the book really coming to understand how giving he is, how he pursues us. I'm trying to see what chapter this was in, chapter 7. This is the chapter
yeah,
called
yeah. This
Jesus.
is the chapter about Jesus. One thing I was told recently is that Jesus, God gives us an opportunity to expose us in private, to heal in private. The enemy
Mm,
wants to expose us in public, to
so
humiliate
good.
us in public. And so
Yeah.
I think what we're seeing here in John 4 is that there was no one else around. Like he was calling her out, but he was exposing her in private so that she could heal in private. And I
Mm,
recently walked through something in my life where I had to confess something that was going on, and I went in private to confess it, and I confessed it to the Lord. And now I've been able to, this last few months, like really heal through this and in a private way. However, God gives us an opportunity to expose ourselves and really confess in private so we can heal. But if we choose not to, the enemy's he's ready to pounce on this
totally.
whole idea of like, how can I humiliate her or him in a way that what was going to be able to be healed in private, you know? And I love this story because Jesus met her with no one around. He could have drug her out and said, look how many husbands she's had.
That's
And, you know,
right.
he could have made it this whole big thing to get her to change. And I think that's where like this Christian culture, this Christian on Christian hate
Yes.
is
Yeah.
like, let's go into the comments and just destroy each other instead of saying, hey, I'm going to go in your DMs
Yeah.
and say, hey, what you just wrote, like you might want to change it in a loving way instead of public humiliation, because just that's
Yes.
just not who God was or is.
Right.
So
I agree. I think a lot of Christianity is about being reasonable and being respectful. And I think what gets tricky is that, yes, we have the right to judge in a godly way because we have to
mhm.
take care of what we have to steward, who he
Yeah,
wants us to be, to have dominion in the world. But I think the way we do that needs to be, we have more pressure on us as Christians because people are waiting to pounce, because the enemy's waiting to pounce and to say,
yeah,
see, you're not doing it right. See, you should feel shame. You're not good enough and all of that. So it's such a fine line.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
One more thing I wanted to bring up, and I'm so excited. I got through all of my stickies. Look, everybody.
Yay!
It says on page 55, and this is probably a good way to start to kind of wrap it up, because I think so many young people, male or female, need to be consciously thinking about, am I the person from all perspectives in my life, but especially in your faith, the person that I would want me.
Mhm.
My whole life, I wanted a Christian relationship, but of course, I wasn't living in a way that reflected God's impact in my life. So how could I expect that a significant other would? It's time to be the person you want wants.
Mhm.
Kind of
Yeah.
confusing, but
Yeah,
you
yep, you gotta slow it down.
yeah. Yeah, a
Yes.
lot of us want something in a spouse that we aren't currently living out. So true,
Ouch.
right? Yeah, and that's even confronted for people in marriages because there are
Mhm.
times that I'm like, "Oh, well, if he was just doing this," or I'm thinking like he doesn't do that, and then I'm like, "Okay, am I doing that?"
Yeah.
Like I'll feel the Lord sometimes be like, "Oh, remember when you had that thought about him the other day?" And then now I'm on the other side. In fact, the older I get, the more I feel he's kind of gently pointing things out to me
Mm.
about me being hypocritical in my marriage or whatever it is.
That's always fun.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the beauty
Yeah.
of having a relationship with him.
Yeah, and I think it's funny now because when I wrote that, I genuinely meant that. Like, we need to become the person that we wants. But the more that I've really, my pastor said this, he did a singleness podcast, and he was talking about
Mm,
singleness. And he said, a lot of the times you hear people say, be the person you wants. But he's like, I would actually like say, be the person God wants you to be,
yeah,
because
yeah,
the being the person desires me to be is going to unlock the person that I want anyways. And it kind of took the pressure off of like, okay, so
true.
now I have to find what kind of guy I want and be the things he needs me to be. It's trickier. So it's funny because I wrote that and I thought, that it does make sense. And I think it's great. It's a great way to live. But I also think it takes a lot of pressure off when you say, okay, God, like, who do you desire me to be? And he desires me to be disciplined. He
Right.
desires me to be loving, nurturing.
Mhm,
He
mm,
desires me to be kind. He desires me to take care of myself. So as I have this checklist of things, and not in like a legalistic way, but like a checklist of things that
right.
is the Proverbs 31 woman, then the man that God has for me is going to love all those qualities about me.
Yeah.
And I think, especially like in this like super feminist world we live in, we're stripping back a lot of the qualities that the Lord's like, I just need you to focus in on these things, not everything else. So that has
Mm,
been hard for me being in corporate America, of to be like, okay, I want to kind of go into my feminine energy, my Proverbs 31, like I want to like, again, if I was looking for my type of man, though it might shift a little. And so I'm like, okay, God, who do you call me to be? What do you want me? Like, what are the traits and what are the things I need to be doing in this season to be who you want me to be?
I what I like that you were saying about that was, yes, you do wanna try to be the person that you want wants, but not in a legalistic way. Like
Yes.
Jesus literally came, so there we didn't have to struggle about the external and the
Yes.
legalism to that degree. He already was fulfilling everything that the Old Testament and Moses' law was teaching. So
Yes.
that's why as Christians we follow him and there's a freedom there. So not in a legalistic way do we have to be perfect
Yeah.
and everything is I have to be exactly
Thank
that person
you.
and then I'll because that's also putting you as God then because you're
Yep.
thinking, well, if I do this formula, he's going to show
Oh,
up.
yep. Yep.
And that's not necessarily true. It's God's timing. And so you just keep working on yourself to try to focus more on who does he want me to be
Exactly.
and that will draw that person to me in God's timing, and I don't need to
Yeah.
stress about it, like you said, I don't have to be all worried about, "Oh, no, I need to be exactly this laundry list of
Yep.
qualities," because we're not if we get into that stress again and that anxiety, that's not of God. It's not of God
Yep.
again.
Yep.
So we just
Yep.
constantly fall into that, of trying to be our own God. So this book is really, really good. I really encourage everybody to go down Amazon and here's the back of it. So what's next for you? Do you think you're gonna keep writing, Kayla?
Yeah, I actually have my second book title already. So I'm in the process of writing another book. Yeah. So
Fant
I want to do a kind of more of like a manual. So it's like people read my book. Okay, now I'm in a bad relationship. How do I get out of it? So I want to do the book's going to be called Break Up God's Way, and it's a kind of a
Mhm.
handbook manual of how to exit and enter relationships healthily. So yeah, I'm excited.
So good, so good. I
Yeah.
love it. I feel like this is so
Yeah.
important in this society now where every relationship and romance is, either put on a pedestal and glamorized, on social media and romanticized, like it might look beautiful, on the camera, but it's so much more than what it looks like with the flowers and the
Yeah.
dress and the colors and the wedding. It's so much more than all of that. Like it's got to stand the test of time, and it's got to be proved, by him for it to be. fulfilling and glorifying him and having fruit, like you said, producing
Yes.
fruit. So thank you so much. Before we end, I
Yeah.
wanted to ask that question. Well, let me ask you two questions actually.
Yeah.
Uh, how do you think in general, because you've really worked on your faith, obviously. You have a lot of recall of scripture over the last several years of you diving back into your faith and making it front and center. So, how do you think Christians in general could be better out in the world? It's a really broad
Mhm.
question, but like what's your
Yeah.
opinion
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is just like we have to start by loving each other in the church well and putting down our defense and our comments and just really work on loving each other well. I think one of the biggest things that outsiders looking in don't want to be a part of is because if we don't love each other, it's really bad advertising. So I think Christians today could work on loving and putting each other first.
Hmm.
And then again, that really that's hard to do without the Holy Spirit. So it really goes back to the quiet time and God refined me and created me a clean heart. I want clean hands and a pure heart. God, that's what I want. Allow me to be that so that I can love my neighbor well, because it's our flesh and the natural part of us doesn't want to do that. So I would say
Yeah.
as we love each other well in the body, then it's going to be way more advertising or way more appetizing to the world.
Yeah. So good. Yeah, and I won't come across as hypocritical, right? Where that's the
Yeah.
big thing with Christianity that turns people off to it. So the final question that I ask every guest is, as you know, it's called room at the table because the Lord always has room for anybody to come to the table and spend time getting to know him so they can feel his love. Who do you wish, whether it's a genre of people or one person or a couple, who do you wish knew that there is room for even them at the Lord's table?
Yeah, I would probably say the people like me, like the broken women, like the
Mm,
women who have either um, been like ones that have actually done the thing to others, or the ones that have put themselves in harm's way, intentionally or unintentionally, by men. So I would say that the women who I think a big one we don't really talk about is the women that have gone through multiple divorces.
mm,
You start to think, well, in a lot of religions, divorce is really frowned upon, and even in Christianity, there's a lot of churches that don't, want even them to be in ministries or to be seen.
yes, yeah.
It's really sad. And I would say, like, anyone who has suffered, through divorce, through brokenness, through we're even with this whole OnlyFans world, our porn is so easily accessible to everyone. Those women that maybe think we're just too far gone. We've done too
Yeah,
much, or
right, right.
our lives are public. Like Jesus came for that world. So that when I that question, I think about the broken women who think their lives are too far gone, so even more so in the niche of sexuality. So
Yeah, so true. Especially right, especially the women who maybe have given themselves away sexually and then they feel used and they feel like not worth anything and there is redemption. There's redemption
yeah.
and forgiveness for all of it. We all make mistakes. So no mistake or sin is too small and your worth is always waiting for you in Christ. So I love that genre of people. That makes so much sense based especially off of this book and where your heart is. So this
Mhm.
has been so
Yes.
educational, informational and rewarding for me to have this conversation with you. I think such an important topic and I really think people are going to love it and I'm hoping even like the younger generations can hear it and learn some good wisdom. And everybody go to Amazon. Do you have a website or how can people get a hold of you if they want to talk with you?
So I have the book on Amazon, and then I have an Instagram called Worth More Co. So they can
Oh,
also find all the details about the book on there as well, and then my personal Instagram as well. So yes,
did you said worth more co?
yep. So Worth More Co. Yep, CO. So
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. That's your website. And we'll put all of this in the show notes as well so people can find you. But everybody go pick up a copy, especially if you're someone who's single or struggling in relationships or just wanting to know how to do them better and maybe look at yourself, whether you're young, old, like there's a lot of good information for in here, especially related to who Jesus says you are and doing it in a healthier way so that you feel better about yourself and also so that you're treating the people you're dating better too from the start, from the get-go, and not keeping those patterns going, which all of us fall into at times. So thank you so much, Kayla, for being here. It was a total joy to meet you and to get to talk about this. Thanks for listening to Room at the Table with Kimberly Milo, friends. If you're enjoying the show, please like, follow, rate, star, and review it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. This all helps grow the show and helps listeners find us. Be sure to share it with a friend also. And if you know of a Christian with an amazing testimony or ministry, or maybe is a Bible teacher or author, feel free to direct message me on social media at Room at the Table with Kimberly Milo. Or you can email me at roomatthetableforyou@gmail.com. Thanks for your support, and I'll see you next time on Room at the Table. And remember, God loves you, and so do I.